Guys, welcome back to another YouTube video. Now, in today's video, guys, I'm going to be doing a movie review for Taika Waititi's Thor: Love and Thunder, but first, of course, I do have just a couple of announcements to make. I'm not really sure what I'm going to be doing for the next video after this. This is kind of the last video that I had planned within these past 2 weeks of the horror slasher killer matchups and the Dead by Daylight developer update and all that kind of stuff. But I do have a video planned for the Ars Political channel. Hopefully I will get it out tomorrow at some time, but this video I'm going to try to upload today. I'm not even going to schedule it for tomorrow. I'm just going to upload it for today. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Read the community post to stay up to date, and join the Discord link is in the About section. Other than that, let's get on to this movie review. It really did take me quite a while to just kind of get processed my feelings about this movie, and, you know, since I've watched this movie, which has been almost been a week since I've watched this movie, and now it's officially been a week since the movie has came out, and I've just been hearing so much mixed stuff from all different MCU fans and all that kind of stuff. And there are some people who absolutely despise this movie. There are some people who were, for the most part, like me, where I think this movie is kind of decent, but there's definitely a lot of misfires with this movie. I'll get to that. And then there's some people who really enjoyed this movie. They thought the humor was great. They didn't have any problem with that, and that's really where most of the mixed stuff comes in, and I'll talk about that later. But for those of you who may not even have seen this movie yet, basically, the plot is Thor. We get to see the return of Thor with this narration from, what's his name, Korg, at the beginning of the movie. And, you know, we get to see that he loses some weight. And for those of you who were excited about the Guardians of the Galaxy plot and all that kind of stuff, like me, and I'll talk about that later, you're going to be disappointed because he leaves the Guardians of the Galaxy at the beginning of the movie to say, you know what, I don't really want to do this. I'm kind of trying to find myself like he was in Thor Ragnarok. Again, a lot of mixed stuff here, as you can tell, and I'm emphasizing that. And I'll talk about it later, but sticking to the plot. After that kind of narration where we get introduced to Thor after Endgame, because there's still some characters that we haven't heard from since Endgame, so Thor was one of those guys. He's kind of one of the later ones. And then we get a narration from Gore about, you know, New Asgard, how things are going. We get to see Valkyrie be kind of the leader of New Asgard and everything like that. We get to see a lot of tourists there and stuff like that. And then we get a narration from Korg about, you know, Jane and all that kind of stuff. And Jane is apparently struggling with cancer. I'm guessing it's because of the ether. And she thinks that by wielding Mjolnir and somehow becoming worthy of it, and the way she actually becomes worthy is because she has cancer. But she thinks because of this, if she becomes worthy and she's able to wield Mjolnir, she's going to be able to heal herself and cure her cancer. It's really weird. I'm pretty sure that's how it went, but it just does not make that much sense to me. I will, again, talk about it later, but she thinks by doing that, it will help cure her cancer. And so she does. She goes to New Asgard, and there's the pieces of Mjolnir that were destroyed by Hela in this display case. And she gets near Mjolnir, and it starts to reconstruct herself, and she wields it once again. And then after that, we have a battle with, I believe it's Thor, Valkyrie, and Korg, and they're battling against the villain of this movie, which is Gore. And this is where we kind of get our first battle against Gore. We got, you know, a couple mini battles in this movie. And Gore, the villain, is not happy because the gods did not protect his daughter, who ended up dying at the beginning of the movie. So he thinks that he kind of has that cliche, well, if God was created, if God is like, you know, if God was created, if God created everybody how he wanted to be, why isn't everything just perfect and everything like that? It's kind of like that kind of argument. So because his daughter died, he thinks that the gods should all be destroyed and killed. So, you know, he's going after them. And so, you know, we get introduced to Zeus in this movie, as we've seen in the trailer. And eventually they build up this team. In the mini battle, Jane is introduced to this team, and that's when they create the whole team. Thor and Jane again meet with each other for the first time since Thor: The Dark World, I believe. And they construct this kind of new team from Ragnarok. So in Ragnarok, you had Loki, Valkyrie, Thor, and Hulk. In this movie, it's Jane, Korg, Valkyrie, and Thor as the team. And they fight against Gore in this movie, as you could tell. And they kind of have all these different powers that have never really been introduced with Stormbreaker. These are powers that are all from Stormbreaker, I'm pretty sure. There's one where they can teleport with him, which I believe has already been introduced. There's another one where they can kind of communicate, and I don't think this is a Stormbreaker power as far as I'm concerned, but they're able to communicate with these children that are held captive by Gore, but while not physically being there, so that they can see how they're doing and tell them what to do and things like that. So that pretty much gives you the general idea of the plot, and how... I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this without spoilers, so just in case, I'm going to give you a spoiler warning, and just in case, so if you don't want to hear any spoilers, just skip ahead. I don't care if you watch the rest of the video. You know, this first part of the video, just let it be for people who have not watched the movie and just want to know what it's kind of about and everything like that. For this next part, I might get into spoilers, but I'm going to try my hardest not to. So if you're not nervous about that, or you're not worried about spoilers and you haven't watched the movie yet, then so be it. But, I don't think I really have any positives for this movie necessarily. I'd say the only maybe minor positive that I have is Gore. I think Gore is a decent enough villain. Some people are saying he's the highlight of the movie and everything like that. Well, he's certainly the highlight of the movie because he doesn't belong in this movie. He's the black sheep of this movie. He just does not belong in this movie. Completely missuited. Very, very dark villain who just I do not think belongs in this movie at all. But I think he's a decent enough villain. I think his motive is just kind of cliche, to be honest with you. It's kind of that, it's like that. How do you want to that perspective of, well, if God is this all powerful being, why doesn't He make everything flourish and perfect and everything like that? It's kind of like that. And so for that reason, Gore just wants to get rid of all the gods and everything like that. So I think he's a decent enough villain. He's certainly got a very dark tone. He's not boring like many of the other Thor villains have been, especially in Thor the Dark World. Certainly not Ragnarok, though, but like in Thor the Dark World. So he's certainly not a boring villain, but he's completely missuited for this movie. But I think he's a decent enough villain to warrant him being put into this kind of positive section. Moving on to the mixed section, though, and that's where quite a bit of the things come in here. The comedy is very mixed for me in this movie. Sorry, guys, I had to think about what I was saying there, but the comedy is very mixed for me. I'm not gonna say that I didn't laugh during the movie. There's some people who said the jokes never landed for them. They didn't laugh a single time. Whatever. I did laugh. I did laugh a couple of times, but there were times where I felt like I was laughing only because the audience was laughing, and I was forced to laugh. There were some times where I genuinely found things funny. There were a couple jokes in there that really, really got to me, and they were very, very funny. But there were also a lot of jokes that were repeated over and over and over again. And I'm just sitting here thinking, there's a couple people in the theater still laughing at this. Like, how are you not tired of hearing this 15 times throughout the movie? I'm sure if you've watched other reviews, you heard about the screaming goats and everything like that. Yeah, it does truly happen probably over 10 times in this movie, and it is so repetitive. And the comedy is very, very mixed for me. Unlike many other MCU movies, though, it doesn't ruin any parts for the movie, at least for me. For some people, they said it ruined it because it's just stretched out throughout the entire movie and you can never take a moment seriously. It wasn't like that for me. It just was too overwhelming. There was too many jokes. And the jokes, thankfully, were not a bunch of MCU jokes. They felt like Taika Waititi's style of jokes and things like that, especially with the music. You can tell it's very, very Taika Waititi themed. You have just by the colors and the outfits and the music that he puts in there, everything puts into this really, really humorous feeling that is not like most other MCU jokes and things like that. So thankfully it wasn't like the MCU jokes that are kind of getting bland. I mean, in Phase 1, I really, really liked the humor in Phase 1. After that, though, the jokes just kind of started to get blander and blander as they just, more and more just felt like the same MCU type jokes. But in this movie, they feel different. They feel like Taika Waititi, so I'll give it that. But the jokes were definitely overwhelming, at least for me. There's some people who are going to get a crack out of it and they're going to be enjoying their ass off the entire movie, but for me, it was a little bit too overwhelming. And I think that's pretty much the only mixed thing, but it's a very, very big mixed thing, and that's why I said a lot of this stuff I'm talking about, I may be separating it into these different categories, but that's just because I don't want everything to be in the mixed category. For the most part, the reason why I put gore in the positive section is because for the most part I thought that was a good aspect to the movie, despite the fact that he's missuited. And then for the negatives, they are still very, very mixed on how I feel about them, but I mostly am negative about how I feel about the negative parts of this movie. So that's why I kind of stretched out, but there is a lot of mixed feelings that I have about this movie. So going on to the negatives, the one big negative for me is just the decision to step away from the Guardians of the Galaxy plot that was already set up after Endgame. You know, we saw Thor and he's like, "Yeah, I'm ready to join you guys. I want to help you guys with your missions or whatever." And in this movie, within the first 15 minutes, he completely ditches the Guardians of the Galaxy plot that we had set up. You know, he's just like, "No, I just want to kind of find myself." When we've already done that, we've already done that in Thor Ragnarok. That was the purpose of Thor Ragnarok before Endgame, to find yourself and not have to rely on Mjolnir so much. But in this movie, Taika Waititi tries to do kind of a second version of Thor Ragnarok with the colors and the humor and even the plot in this case, and it just does not land for me. There's no reason why he needs to do it again. So they ditched the very, very potentially great plot that he had set up for that Avengers Endgame had set up for the Guardians of the Galaxy. In fact, I thought Thor was going to be in the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 movie, and I'm pretty sure that's still planned, but now that's all ruined for me, and I'm definitely not going to be as excited for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 knowing that Thor chose not to join the team. And instead of going with that plot, Taika Waititi goes with this love and thunder plot that just did not work for me for the most part. I don't know why they chose to bring in Jane this late into the franchise after it's been, or I guess not franchise, but Marvel Cinematic Universe, when it's been since Thor the Dark World, since we've seen Jane, and I think it's too late to bring her back. And even if you did bring her back, it could have been a lot better than what he did there. And in this, or what Taika Waititi did in this movie. He just kind of cheated her in and made her worthy for absolutely no reason. I get Lady Thor is canon. There's a lot of things that you can claim are just canon because they've been in some random issue of the MCU comics. But if you're gonna use something that not a lot of people are aware of, do it right. But in this movie, he just didn't. It's not that I hated Lady Thor, I hated Jane as Lady Thor or anything like that. I thought she looked really, really good as Lady Thor, but what didn't make sense to me was why she was worthy and her kind of back and forth with going back into this cancer state, and then immediately after she wields the Mjolnir, she's like all fine and healthy and able to fight these big villains and everything like that. It just doesn't make sense to me. And then by the end of the movie, when they kind of do their conclusion with the whole love story and everything like that, I don't think it was a very good conclusion to bring back Jane for one movie and then you just kind of conclude it like that. I just don't think it was really worth it, if you ask me. And I think that's pretty much it. I feel like I'm missing something, but I think that is pretty much it. Like I said, though, very, very mixed movie for me. It might seem like I'm hating on this movie too much for the plot and or anything or stuff like that, but I'm still very, very mixed on how I feel about this movie. There were parts that I liked about it, there were parts that I disliked about it, and there were most of it was just parts where I'm not really sure how I feel about it exactly. So I'm kind of in this very, very in-between where sometimes I'm like, I hate this movie so much, and then other times I'm like, you know what, that was actually a pretty decent movie. But I think ultimately what should have happened to satisfy many of the fans, because I know there were other people who were disappointed by the ditching of the Guardians of the Galaxy plot with Thor. I think a better plan would have been to either keep Thor in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 like I thought was going to happen, which I think would be the best choice, or create a show if you want to introduce this love part where you could have more time to keep Jane back from her reintroduction after it's been so long, and also be able to go on these adventures with the Guardians of the Galaxy. Maybe they go on multiple adventures throughout the show. And it doesn't even have to be like a 2-season show. It could just be a 1-season show. The MCU's done that many, many times. And it could be like a 6-episode show with Thor and the Guardians of the Galaxy and Jane and everything like that, and I think it would work. In fact, before this movie came out and before the trailers came out and I heard about the title of this movie, I thought it was actually a show, and then I realized it was a movie once I saw the trailer, and I was like, oh, okay, wow, now I'm gonna have to watch the movie. And then initially I thought Jane was a part of this whole multiverse thing and everything like that with her coming back, but no, it just turns out she came back from Thor: The Dark World. It wasn't even the multiverse. So yeah, there was a lot of things going into this movie that I started to discover more and more about, and then eventually when I watched this movie, then I really discovered all of the the mixed stuff and everything like that. So like before I knew anything about this movie, to be honest, I was pretty excited, but now I'm in this spot where I'm I'm deciding whether or not I even want to say that this movie is decent. I think overall, though, initially I gave this movie coming out of the theaters, because coming out of the theaters, for the most part, I enjoyed it. I gave this movie a 3.5 stars on Rotten Tomatoes. Now, I'm not going to convert that directly to 10 out of 10, or the out of 10 score like I usually do, because I actually decreased the score to a 2.5 out of 5 stars. So, overall, I would say, I think the biggest positive for me would be, and this isn't even really a huge positive, is that it got me excited for an additional thing going forward in Phase 4. We have the Celestials and we have the multiverse, and then I'm not going to spoil it, but we have another thing with Thor that we're going to see more of in Phase 4, hopefully, which, again, I'm not sure if I'm positive about it or negative on it, because it's technically canon, but I don't know. I'm going to have to see in the future how it goes, but I don't know if it's going to work for the MCU. All I can say is watch the end credits, you'll see what I mean, and there's going to be more coming in Phase 4, another thing to get excited for. So overall, this movie did at least get me excited for something in the future, which, if this movie didn't do that, then I probably would have gave it a much lower score, because if an MCU movie doesn't get me excited for a future MCU movie, then what's even the purpose of it anymore, right? So, overall, I think I'm going to give Thor: Love and Thunder, I think I'm going to give it a 5.5 out of 10. Typically if I directly converted it, 2.5 out of 5 stars, that would be just a pure 5 out of 10. But I think I'm going to give it a 5.5 out of 10. It's an okay/decent movie. There's nothing particularly bad about it. I just think there were some decisions that were made by Taika Waititi's part that I don't think were the smartest decisions. I think he went a little bit too overboard sometimes. He was trying too hard to make it a second Ragnarok because he realized the success of Ragnarok. So he's like, well, now let's just pump it up to 100% in this one. And he didn't realize that Thor Ragnarok kind of had the perfect balance, but Thor: Love and Thunder now just goes a little bit too far this time around. So overall, I'm giving this movie a 5.5 out of 10. Still very, very mixed about it. And the more I talk about it, the more I'm still just unsure about it. You'd think I'd talk about it and I'd finally be able to make a decision like I usually do, but it just doesn't help in the case of Thor: Love and Thunder, because this is just such a mixed bag of nuts for me. So other than that, that is it for the movie review. Tell me what you guys think about this movie in the comment section. I would really, really like to hear your thoughts, especially on Thor: Love and Thunder. And other than that, join the Discord. Link is in the About section. Read the community post to stay up to date with that future content. Subscribe to Ars Political if you are interested in politics. I got future content coming up for that channel. Hopefully tomorrow I'll get the new video that I'm going to be doing. I already have something in mind. So other than that, like and subscribe, guys, and I'll see you next time.